Hi, and welcome to Crafts with Ash. My name's Ashley, and today I'm going to bring you 4 really cute pastel themed spring and Easter DIYs. These are so simple, but add so much brightness and cheer to your home. So I can't wait to share them with you. But first, let's talk about some business. If you are new here, welcome to my channel. If you love all things DIY and decor and parties, then you are going to love what I have to offer. So don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, then hit that little notification bell so you can be notified anytime I upload a new video. Then hop on over to Facebook and like me there and follow me there, and follow me on Instagram. I do a lot of behind the scenes content that I know that you would love to see. All right, let's hop right into it. For this first DIY, I'm going to be using 3 different eggs that I got from the Dollar Tree. The first one I'm going to use is this egg on a stake, and then this double egg. I'm actually just going to be using the smaller one, and then this unfinished wood egg. So the first thing I did was take that egg on a stake, and I just plucked the stake part off, and then by using my hairdryer and that little scraper, I just heated up the glue that was holding the stake on there and just scraped off all of the rest of the steak on there. It did leave a little bit, so I did have to work at it and get it off, but eventually you're going to see that I do give up and just kind of sand it down, because I did not have all day to start plucking this off. So I got off what I could and then sanded down the rest. I also took off the little sticker, and then that way it was ready to work with. But just get off as much as you can. I mean, if it's not perfect, it's fine, it'll do. But like I said, I just kind of gave up and sanded it down. Then I flipped that one over and tore off all of those little foam flowers. They came off pretty easy. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. We're actually going to be working on the back of it, so just take off what you can. Then I took the unfinished wood egg, cut off the tag, and then I detached the little egg from the big egg. And then again, using my hair dryer, I heated up the little sticker and scraped that off. The reason why I leave this footage in here is because I get a lot of questions asking how I get stickers off and things like that. So sometimes I like to leave this in here so that way you can see what the process is and what works for me. I know some crafters use some Goo Gone or just a soapy rag, a wet rag. So it just kind of, you just have to use what works for you. So after I got all the stickers off and all the stakes off, I took the big unfinished wood egg and I coated it with Mod Podge. Then I took this light pink chevron scrapbook paper that I got from Hobby Lobby. And pretty much anytime you see scrapbook paper, it is going to come from Hobby Lobby. But I just went ahead and coated it with Mod Podge and then stuck my scrapbook paper on top. I thought that this would be easier than tracing the egg, cutting it out, and trying to line it up. So this is what I did for all 3. Then I grabbed the middle size egg. This is the one that had the stake on it, and I did the same thing. So I just coated the top, or at least now it's the back, with Mod Podge. And then I took this really pretty like floral paisley type of lavender or purple scrapbook paper, and then I just pushed it down. That way it was nice and smooth. Then again, I did the same thing on this last one, and this is the one that was attached to the bigger round egg. And I just put some Mod Podge on there and then stuck my scrapbook paper right on top and then used my hands to smooth it down. After all my scrapbook paper was pushed on and dry, I took my scissors and just cut around each egg. I wasn't trying to get really close to the egg because in a minute you're going to see that I take my sanding block that I got from the Dollar Tree and I sand off any excess paper. I love doing this method because it gives me that nice clean cut on the edges of whatever I am Mod Podging. So as you can see, those little strips of paper are coming off, and you want to sand in the down direction. Now, I kind of wanted to give this a little rustic look, so I did sand a little harder on the edges. That way it kind of ripped the paper a little bit, and the white of the paper showed up. So as you can see, I put it down and really sanded it, and in a second, you'll see I do move it closer to the camera. See how you can see how the edges are kind of ripped a little bit, and it kind of brought up the white of the paper. So I went ahead and did that on all 3 of the eggs, and then I decided to do the same thing to the middle. So I distressed the middle of each egg too, and you can see, especially on this one, that it did rip the paper a little bit, and see how it's sanding it down. I absolutely love that look. Now, I didn't do it too much. I just did a little bit just to add some rustic touches and distress it, and just a little bit of dimension. After my eggs were distressed, I laid them out kind of how I wanted them. So I put the big one in the back and then just layered the 2 other ones in the front. Now, the only thing that I did make sure to do is I purposely had the 2 front eggs touching the surface. So I don't know if that makes sense, but if you were to stand it up, the 2 front eggs would be touching the table or whatever you're going to put this on. So you could see the bigger egg is not touching the bottom, but I made sure that the 2 were even on the bottom and touching the surface. Then after I had them all hot glued together, I took this burlap teal or turquoise ribbon that I got from the Dollar Tree and cut a strip off, and then I cut off the ends with the wire on it. Then I went ahead and pulled the strings off the edge to give it that frayed look. Next, I laid my ribbon across the 3 eggs at the bottom so it would cover all 3, and then I hot glued it to the back. Now, you want to pull tight and make sure it's taut. That way it's not very loose in the front. So after I had that all glued down, there were some little strings that were hanging off, so I just kind of cut it. And then I took this berry vine that I got from Hobby Lobby, and I love this berry vine. I'm going to be using it in a couple other DIYs too in this video, but I just love it because I love the colors. The pastel is perfect, but I did the same thing. I started in the back, and then I hot glued it, and what I did was take a little piece of ribbon and cover where I hot glued it. That way it gave it extra support. Then I wrapped it around the front 2 times and then hot glued the other end to the back as well. Now, you do have to hold this berry vine down after you hot glue it. That way it sticks, and that way it's secure. So after I was done, I turned it over and I just decided that it needed something else. So what I did was I took this like lacy, glittery white ribbon. I honestly don't know where this came from. I stole it from my mom, so I'm not sure where she got it. But obviously I wanted the berry vine to lay on top of this, so I kind of just cut off a piece and just squeezed it underneath there. And then I did the same thing and I just hot glued each end around to the back. Now, as you can see, the back of this project is not very pretty, and I considered covering it. Usually, if you know me, I do not cover my backs. It doesn't bother me, but then I just didn't. But if you want to cover your back, you are more than welcome. To complete the front, I took that bow off of that stake that I took off that egg, and I hot glued it to the side of this little egg display. Then I decided that I wanted it to stand. I wanted the whole thing to stand instead of hanging it. So what I did was took some tumbling tower blocks and I hot glued 2 to each of the eggs. So first I started off with 1. Now the trick to this is you want to put hot glue and then kind of push it back a little bit so it leans backwards. and then just make sure it's flush to your surface. So I did one on each egg, and then you're going to see that I add another one to each of the tumbling tower blocks. So there's 2 tumbling tower blocks on each egg, and this worked out perfect. It's standing, it was very secure, so usually I can't get things to stand, so I was actually pretty proud of myself that this worked. But I absolutely love how this came out. It is so cute, and it is vintage and rustic, but still keeping with that pastel theme. But what do you think? For this next DIY, I picked up this wreath from the Dollar Tree, and it came like this. It kind of looks like an egg, so I thought it was perfect. And then I picked up these letters from Walmart. It's an H and a P. Obviously, I think you can tell what we're going to spell out here. And then I got this fabric fat quarter, and this is also from Walmart. It is a little bit more, but I just loved the color, so I decided just to grab it. So the first thing I did was I took the sticker off of that fabric and then cut the tag off of the wreath, and then I spread out the fabric and stuck my little wreath on top. Now you want to make sure that the fabric is facing up, so it's the front of the fabric, and then put your wreath on top. And then with a generous amount of hot glue, you're going to cover the back of it and then push it down. I just thought that this was the easiest way to do it instead of, again, trying to trace it out and then pull it. So you want to make sure, now this was kind of tricky because when you put the wreath down, you need to make sure that it is pulling tight. That way it's not loose in the middle. So you're kind of doing a couple things at once. But as you can see right here, it was easy for me to lift it up and then add more hot glue and then pull it real tight and then push it down. So that's kind of what I did. Now in hindsight, I could have probably done it in like smaller little areas and chunks, but I thought this worked out great. Then I went ahead and cut around it. So I cut off all the excess fabric. Then I went in with my smaller scissors. Now, I do have to say the smaller scissors from Dollar Tree didn't really work out as well as I thought they were going to, and it's probably because this is fabric and not paper. But I just went ahead and trimmed all of it up so you didn't see any fabric hanging from behind the wreath. Once my egg was covered, I put that to the side. Then I took my H and my P and I gave each of them one good coat of Waverly chalk paint in ivory. Now, the inspiration for this project actually, I believe I saw something like this at Kirkland's. I'm not sure. I have it in my head that I know I saw it somewhere, but I can't remember. And I honestly don't remember exactly what it looked like. So I just decided to add my own touch to it. But I thought that this turned out really cute. So like I said, I just gave each of these pieces a nice coat of Waverly chalk paint and ivory. And then after it dried, I took some of this petroleum jelly and in random spots, I just rubbed the jelly all over each of the letters. Then I took my ballet slipper from Waverly and I gave the H a coat of that, and then I took my yellow apple barrel paint and I, forgive me, can't remember the name, and I just painted the P with that. Once those both were completely dry, I took this little scraper and just lightly scraped over the letters to give it that chippy wood look. Now, it did kind of come off in chunks. I just, for some reason, cannot get this technique down. I've tried to do it so many times. I mean, maybe that is what it's supposed to look like and I'm not realizing it, but it does kind of look like chippy wood now that I'm watching it like this. But I just kind of ran my scraper lightly over it to take off some of the colored paint on each. Then you're going to see that I go in and dry brush that ivory chalk paint over it just to add a little bit more distressing. But I think in the end, both of these letters turned out exactly how I wanted it to look. Next, I set those to the side to dry, and I took this long block board, I guess you want to call it, from the Dollar Tree, and again using my hair dryer, I heated it up so I could get the tag off, and then I just gave the top, well, it was the bottom, but now it's going to be the top, the top and the sides and each of the edges, a coat of my Waverly chalk paint in ivory. As that was drying, I took my egg again, and I took that berry vine that I was using from Hobby Lobby, and I just kind of formed some ears. So what I did was I made one little ear, and then I doubled it up and then twisted both vines together just to make it a little bit more thick and defined. And then I cut off the excess. Then I took the end of the berry garland and just did it again, but I lined it up with the first ear, that way they were both the same size. Next, I flipped over my little egg and hot glued my ears down. Now, at first, I hot glued them down a little lower than what I wanted, so you're going to see me pull them off and make them a little higher. Now, as I was editing this, I was like, dummy, why didn't you just take the ears and stick them to the top of the wreath? I could have just added some hot glue. So I actually would kind of recommend that because these ears still ended up a little lower than what I would have wanted, and I still might go back and take them off the back and then just stick them in the actual wreath itself on top. But that's just an idea for you too, and then you don't have to mess with all this hot glue. But you live and you learn, right? Hindsight is 20/20. But either way, you just want to get your ears on there and make sure that they are secure. Now, to give my ears a little bit more support, I took some of that scrap fabric that I had cut off of the original egg, and I hot glued it to the front of each of the stems of the ears. I hope that made sense. Obviously, you can see what I'm doing, but I just added some fabric. That way, it gave it a little bit more security and won't come off. Next, I took that big wooden block and then my H, my egg, and my P. And I just kind of arranged each piece how I wanted it on that little block. And that big block is going to be the base. So what I did was put the wreath all the way in the back, and then I put the H and the P towards the front. Then just by using hot glue, I just hot glued the H down. Now, before I hot glued the wreath down, I went ahead and hot glued my P down. Now, I did line up my wreath so I knew where I wanted it, and then after that, I did hot glue my P down. So then I took my wreath, or my egg, or my O, whatever you want to call it, and I put a generous amount of hot glue onto the bottom and then pushed it down. Then I hot glued some tumbling tower blocks to the back of the wreath. That way it helped it stand up and it wouldn't fall backwards. But you want to make sure that it's tight, so you can see that I'm going to push it real tight in there, and so that the O is wedged right in between the blocks and the letters. So then I took some hot glue, and where the letters touched the front of the wreath, I also added some hot glue there too. I love this. I think the colors are so pretty. But you tell me, I want to know, would you have added the ears? Sometimes I keep going back and forth. My mom and I can't decide whether we like the ears, but either way, I thought this was super cute. What do you think? For this next DIY, I used these little Peep headbands that I got from the Dollar Tree. Now, if you've been following me for a while, you know that I've been obsessed with using these. They are just so cute and make for really unique decor. So the first thing I did was take my wire cutters and cut each of these little Peeps off of the headbands themselves. Then the best way that I found to remove the little spiral wire from the bunny is to heat up the little tail part with a heat gun or hair dryer, and then once the glue is melted, go ahead and pull that spring out. Once I had all of the wires out of each of the Peeps, I went ahead and lined them up how I wanted them to go. I'm going to make a little banner or garland here, and this is going to be very bright and colorful. So I was just trying to decide how to line up all the colors of the bunnies. Next, I took this bag of glitter fill from the Dollar Tree. These are little balls, and they do have glitter on them, although I do have to say the glitter really doesn't shed. Then by using a needle and a thread, I just started threading through all of the little balls. Now, I really did not have a system for this. The only thing that I did do was put 6 balls before I would put a bunny. And then, of course, I mixed up all the sizes and the colors. So I didn't put 2 sizes next to each other, and I didn't put 2 colors next to each other. But I just made sure to string on 6, then put a bunny, then 6 more, then put a bunny, until I ran out of bunnies. Now, once I had 6 balls strung on, I went ahead and placed a bunny down, but I did not glue it yet because I needed to make sure that I was going to have enough string to go all the way down. So I just placed it on there, and I didn't want any of the string to show, so I really butted the bunny up to the last little ball. So I just did this until it was all covered. And then I went through and hot glued all of my little bunnies onto the strings. So this DIY really isn't that hard. It's super simple and really just easy to do, but it just was kind of a little bit time consuming. So like I said, after I got all of my balls beaded on, I just took some hot glue and hot glued the bunny down. Now you want to make sure to put the hot glue on the ears. You don't want to hot glue in the middle of the bunny because then they'll flop over. So you want to make sure to put the hot glue at the tippy top of the ears and then push down. Now I do recommend doing this on some wax paper because I just was being lazy and I knew it was gonna stick to my little background there, but I just dealt with it. But if you do it on wax paper, you'll make life so much easier for yourself. After I glued down all my bunnies, I flipped them over and added some hot glue to the back. That way it just reinforced it. So this garland is just so cute, and it's springy and it's cheerful, and it really just brightens up the entire room. But what do you think? For my next DIY, I'm going to be using this sign from the Dollar Tree, and I specifically went with this sign because it's a little shorter than like those other really long ones, but really any one of those would work. So the first thing I did was plucked off that little chick from the front, and then I pulled off the ribbon on the back, and then I got the little staples out. Then I went ahead and sanded it. That way it was a smooth surface for me to paint on. Next, I gave my board a coat of Waverly chalk paint and ivory. Now, I really wasn't going for full coverage here. I just wanted the majority of it to be covered, but I just went ahead and painted it. While that was drying, I took this pack of unfinished wood eggs. Now, these I actually got from Hobby Lobby, but they do have them at the Dollar Tree. I just was not able to find them. And then I took these pieces of scrapbook paper that I also got at Hobby Lobby. So I just took one egg, and then instead of tracing the circle around it, I just cut off a square big enough for the egg to fit on, and then I'm going to Mod Podge the egg onto the square and then cut it out. Kind of like what we did in that very first project, and that way it just eliminates the step of having to trace and then having to carefully cut it out and then lining it up. So I did this for 6 of the eggs, and on each of the eggs I did a different piece of scrapbook paper. So after I got all of my egg Mod Podged on, I took my scissors and just roughly cut around the egg. Then, just like the other project, I'm going to take my sanding block and sand all of the edges to make it that nice clean cut. Now again, you want to sand in the down direction, and then that way you have a nice clean edge. Then I went ahead and sanded the edges to bring out the white again to kind of give it that rustic and vintage look, just like I did in that very first project. While you watch me sand all of these down, I just want to thank you so much again for joining me today. And if you are loving what you are seeing so far, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up because it really helps to grow my channel. I also gained a ton of new subscribers in the last couple weeks, so I just want to welcome all of you if you're new and thank all of you so much for joining me. My page or my channel has literally exploded in the last couple weeks, and it could not have been without all of your support. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Here are how all the eggs looked after they have been cut out and distressed. Next, I took my board that I had painted and this ruler, and I specifically bought this specific ruler from the Dollar Tree because it was the width of shiplap, or it looked like it could give out that look of shiplap. So I just put it in the middle of my board, and then with a permanent black marker, I drew lines on the top and the bottom. Then I took my sanding block and I sanded it down. That way the black marker wasn't so bold and dark. And I sanded it down, that way it all blended together. Then I took those eggs and I lined them up in the middle of my board. Now at first I had each of them going straight up and down, and then I decided to angle each one of them a little bit so that way it gave a little bit more character and added a little bit more detail. Once I had them lined up how I liked it, I took these letters that I got from the Dollar Tree and my brush that I had used to paint the board, and I just dry brushed over each of the letters that I was going to use. I did this so it kind of looked distressed, but also to tone down the bold black color. And then I went ahead and put my letters on each egg, and of course I'm spelling out Easter. Once I had all my letters down, I went ahead and hot glued each of my eggs down to the board. Then to add a little bit more detail, I took my antique Waverly wax from Walmart and a makeup sponge, and I just distressed my board. So I just lightly dry brushed over the top and the bottom, and then I went around each of the eggs as well. I think this added so much to the look of this project. Then I lightly sanded over each of those letters to give it a more rustic look. Next, to protect my letters and my scrapbook paper, I went ahead and put some Mod Podge over each of the eggs. To hang my project, I'm going to take this nautical rope that I got from the Dollar Tree, and I cut a long piece off and then tied a knot on one end. Then with a generous amount of hot glue, I'm going to go ahead and hot glue it to my board. Now, I could still see where the staples were originally on that board, so that's just what I used to tell me where to glue the knots on. So I did a knot on each side of the rope and then hot glued each one down. Now you do have to hold each of the knots down to get it to stay, but if you hold it down long enough, this has been hanging for about a week now and it has not fallen or anything. Now you can always add permanent glue too if you want, but hot glue worked for me. So after they were glued on, I just went ahead and cut off any excess. Then I wanted to add just a little bit more detail, so I took some berry vine again and just simply wrapped it around the rope. I think this sign came out so adorable, and I absolutely love how it's just pastel and very colorful, and it is actually in the entrance in my mom's foyer in her home, and it just has such a bright spring look. I love how this came out. It is just so cute. But what do you think? As I stated multiple times before, I am so loving the pastel colors for this spring and Easter season. I just think that it makes the house look so bright and cheerful, and it's just so much fun to look at. You're gonna have to let me know in the comments which one of these DIYs was your favorite. I honestly think that my favorite is the garland, but then I also really love the eggs together and the hop. I don't know, I think I really love them all, but like I said, they just add those touches of spring and cheerfulness that we could all really use right now. Thank you so much for joining me. If you haven't done so already, please don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, then hit that little notification bell so you can get notified anytime I upload a new video. I hope that you got a lot of great ideas and were inspired to make your own DIYs. Well, until I see you again, I'll craft with you soon. Bye!